Right now, more than 300,000 people across France and Spain have been forced out of their homes, resorts, and entire towns as wildfires tear through both countries, at a scale officials are calling historic. In France, nearly 242,000 acres have already burned, an area the country's own interior minister describes as roughly 10 times the size of Paris, and which he called a historic record. In Spain, an entire town of 3,400 people sits completely deserted after fire swept through it, forcing every single resident out. And off the coast of Italy, the Coast Guard has had to rescue more than 400 tourists and swimmers trapped on a beach with no way out except by sea as a separate fire cut off every escape route on land. This is the story of exactly what is burning across Spain, France, and Italy right now, how bad it has actually gotten, and how officials and scientists are describing this moment as exactly what decades of warning said would eventually happen. No hype, no exaggeration, just what is actually happening and what the data behind it means. Drop a comment and tell me if you or anyone you know is anywhere near these fires, because I read every one of these. If you want grounded coverage instead of panic headlines, subscribe, it is free, and a like helps this reach people who need to see this. Right now, let us go for 5,000 likes on this one. Thank you. Now let us get into it. Let us start in France, where the damage has reached a scale the country's own government is describing in historic terms. French Interior Minister Laurent Nunez confirmed that nearly 242,000 acres have been ravaged by wildfires so far, calling it a historic record, and noting the burned area is nearly 10 times the size of the city of Paris itself. At least 197,000 people have been evacuated across France as a direct result, in what Nunez said was probably the largest peacetime evacuation the country has ever carried out. The worst of it has centered on the Gironde region in the southwest, where fires burning near Lacanau and north of the Arcachon Basin forced French authorities to send emergency phone alerts, ordering residents in at least 5 separate towns to evacuate toward Bordeaux, where thousands are now sheltering as the fires continue to rage nearby. The fires arrived on top of an already brutal summer for the region. Intense heat from successive heat waves, drying out vegetation that had grown unusually thick after an unusually wet European winter, turning the landscape into what officials have repeatedly called a tinderbox. Even Bordeaux's famous wine country has felt the ripple effects, with concerned wine buyers calling local guides from around the world to check on the region's vineyards. Though, as of the latest reports, the vineyards themselves had not actually been touched by the flames. Spain's fires have followed a similarly severe trajectory, concentrated heavily in the mountainous areas surrounding Madrid. In the town of Navas del Rey, home to roughly 3,400 people in the community of Madrid, a wildfire that had been burning since Thursday swept directly through the town on Friday, forcing authorities to evacuate every single resident until further notice. Satellite and ground images since have shown the town sitting completely deserted, with charred shrubs lining the roads leading in and the ground itself blackened along several stretches near the entrance. Spain's Interior Ministry confirmed that more than 100,000 people had been evacuated nationwide, including close to 30,000 from the Madrid region alone, and by Monday, that regional figure had been updated to 63,152 people evacuated specifically across the central Spanish regions of Madrid, Toledo, and Ávila. 2 of the largest fires, burning west of the capital near the town of San Martín de Valdeiglesias, have been placed under a single unified command through Spain's military emergency unit, with the unit's chief, Lieutenant General Francisco Javier Marcos Izquierdo, confirming that keeping the 2 blazes from fully merging has become a central priority, even as they continue touching each other at points along a stretch roughly 14 to 15 kilometers or about 9 miles long. To fire. The Spanish government has deployed 2,737 personnel, 426 ground vehicles, and 21 aircraft, reinforced by additional crews sent from Greece, Italy, and Portugal. A separate fire further east in the Castellón province near the town of Laval d'Uixó has produced its own dramatic footage of firefighters working directly beneath walls of leaping flame, with officials urging residents to stay away from the area entirely. Residents in some of the hardest hit areas have taken matters into their own hands where they can, with images from El Tiemblo, west of Madrid, showing a homeowner using a garden hose to douse burning trees in a forest directly beside his own residential neighborhood, as flames threaten to restart nearby, a small but telling sign of just how close this fire has pushed to populated areas, even with thousands of trained personnel already deployed across the region. Italy's fires have brought their own distinct and in some ways more immediately dangerous moment. On Sunday, the Italians' Coast Guard confirmed it had rescued more than 400 tourists and swimmers from a beach at Calamanicore within the municipality of Peschici on Italy's southeastern Apulia coast, after a wildfire cut off every route out by land, leaving the sea as the only remaining way to reach safety. Despite facing fires of its own, Italy has also been sending resources to help its neighbors, dispatching 2 of its Canadair water-dumping firefighting aircraft to reinforce the effort in Spain, part of a broader wave of international cooperation that has emerged as the crisis has grown across all 3 countries simultaneously. Croatia has sent 2 additional water bombers to France, alongside 2 more aircraft from Portugal, and 2 heavy-lift Black Hawk helicopters from the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Spain, in turn, has continued receiving reinforcements from the Netherlands and Portugal, with 2 more aircraft expected. From Greece, as the response continues to scale up across the continent. It is worth understanding exactly why this particular summer has produced fires at this scale, because the mechanism behind it is well documented rather than mysterious. Europe experienced an unusually wet winter heading into this year, which allowed vegetation across large parts of Spain, France, and the wider Mediterranean region to grow unusually thick and abundant. Then came a string of successive heat waves. Stretching back to May, the same heat waves that have already produced record-breaking temperatures and, in France's case, its deadliest heat event in decades earlier this summer. That combination, abundant vegetation followed by intense, repeated heat, dried out the landscape into precisely the kind of fuel load capable of sustaining the fast-moving, hard-to-contain fires now burning across all 3 countries. Julie G. Pausas, a researcher at the Center for Research on Desertification in Valencia, Spain, described the current fires bluntly, saying they are exactly what scientists expected, and that for decades, researchers have warned that continuing to drive up global temperatures would bring a significant increase in the frequency, size, and intensity of wildfires, like the ones now burning. The scale of this fire season becomes even clearer when measured against Europe's own historical baseline. According to data from Copernicus, the European Union's climate change monitoring service, France has already experienced 3.4 times as many individual wildfires in 2026 as its typical annual average, while Spain has experienced 1.7 times its own annual average, and this is with several months of the traditional fire season still remaining. Separate satellite tracking shows the total area burned across European Union countries. So far this year, now ranks as the 2nd largest on record. This is not the first time in recent years Southern Europe has faced a summer like this either. Wildfires tore through the same general region, including Spain's Andalusia area, back in the summer of 2022, forcing thousands of evacuations at the time and drawing similar warnings from officials about worsening summer conditions across the Mediterranean. What researchers now point to as different about this year is less the existence of the threat itself, which has been building for years, and more its scale, its persistence across 3 separate countries at once, and the sheer size of the coordinated international response it has required. The crisis has not stopped at these 3 countries either. Wildfires were already burning across Portugal and Greece as far back as early July, well before this latest wave. He hit Spain, France, and Italy at full force, part of the same broader Mediterranean fire season that has now stretched across nearly the entire southern half of the continent for close to a month. Fires have also broken UT across the United Kingdom this summer, prompting Britain's Prince William to describe the wildfires hitting Spain, France, and the UK together as a stark reminder of the challenges posed by what he called an increasingly extreme climate. None of this is happening independent of the broader pattern driving Europe's weather this entire summer. It traces back to the same record-warm ocean surface temperatures the European Union's own Copernicus Marine Service measured for the month of June, the same deadly Omega block that trapped extreme heat over Western and Central Europe for over a week in late June, and the same developing El Niño event the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has flagged as likely to become one of the strongest ever measured by the end of this year, all of it compounding on a continent that scientists consistently describe as the fastest warming on Earth, heating at roughly twice the global average rate. So what does all of this actually mean for you, particularly if you have any travel plans to Spain, France, or Italy in the coming weeks, or family and friends currently in the affected regions? It means treating official evacuation orders exactly as seriously as the residents of Navas del Rey and the towns near Bordeaux have had to, since these fires have moved fast enough to leave authorities describing entire evacuations as unprecedented in peacetime. It means understanding that the danger from a wildfire event at this scale is not limited to the immediate fire line itself, as the 400 tourists rescued by sea in Apulia demonstrate, since fires of this intensity can cut off escape routes in directions that may not seem obviously threatened until it is already happening. Anyone with an upcoming trip to affected regions should check both National Tourism Authority advisories and airline notices directly before traveling, since flight and rail disruptions have already followed several of these evacuations, and conditions on the ground have been shifting day to day as containment lines hold in some areas and give way in others. And it means recognizing that this is not an isolated bad week for Southern Europe, but part of the same summer-long pattern. record heat, record drought stress, and now record or near record wildfire activity that has been building across the continent since the unusually dry conditions following that wet winter first set the stage for it back in the spring. The honest, grounded summary is this: wildfires burning simultaneously across France, Spain, and Italy have forced more than 300,000 people from their homes, with France alone confirming nearly 242,000 acres burned in what its interior minister has called a historic record, and Spain evacuating more than 100,000 people nationwide, including the complete evacuation of at least one town near Madrid. Italy's Coast Guard has had to rescue hundreds of tourists cut off by fire along its southeastern coast, even as Italy sends its own firefighting aircraft to help Spain. All three countries are now drawing on a coordinated wave of international reinforcements from Greece, Portugal, the Netherlands, Croatia, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia, as France and Spain individually report wildfire counts running well above their own annual averages for a year that is not yet over. We are going to keep tracking this as containment efforts continue, sourced the same way we did today, straight from National Interior Ministries, Copernicus, and the emergency responders actually fighting these fires on the ground, not recycled headlines. Subscribe so you do not miss the updates as the situation develops, because based on how this summer has gone so far, it is very likely not over yet. And leave that comment below. Tell me if you are anywhere near these fires right now, because behind every one of these numbers is a family from Navas del Rey watching their entire town sit empty on satellite images, a group of 400 tourists in Apulia who had nowhere left to go but the sea, and firefighting crews from 6 different countries right now working side by side across a language barrier, because this fire season has gotten too large for any single country to fight alone. 5,000 likes on this one. Let us go. See you in the next one.